Hey, what's up, Truth Seekers? Welcome back. I'm going to try putting some you in YouTube, you meaning me, some video. Hope you like it. It'll be a little more work, but I want to feel like we're actually having a conversation, an interaction. We're actually engaging each other here. And I love having these chats in the real world, but I want to feel like I'm replicating that here on the YouTube. And lately, some of my Catholic friends have been pretty upset or confused, conflicted, ambivalent, discontented, or however you want to say it, because they feel like they're being trolled by the Holy Vicar of Christ, their Pope, Pope Francis, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, however you say it. And they kind of are, I got to say. So quick disclaimer, I don't believe on clowning or hating on anyone's beliefs without very good reason. Here's the deal. If you believe, as I do, that everything that is created, everything that we are, was put here for a reason, and that religion is the pathway for us to get back to our Creator and become more like Him in the process, to purify and refine ourselves, then that pathway, by necessity, must not be above criticism. We must re-examine and self-examine to make sure that we're doing a good job. So the Pope has made about 4 comments recently that have caught my attention. It's the 4th one I'm speaking about now that led me to make this video. Because again, I don't want it to seem like I'm just hating on the church, but if you follow doctrine, if you study the scriptures and the wisdom that's been preserved for your benefit, at some point you have to start asking the right questions. Now, this coalition was responding to an event that was happening at the Vatican. It was called the Biological Extinction Conference, and it was sponsored by the Pontifical Academy of Sciences. What was the discussion? How to save the natural world on which we depend. Now, I'm going to leave the spiritual side of this out of there, which I think is unfortunate for those who refuse to receive any type of spiritual wisdom, but we'll do that. And we'll just talk about what's posed here, that the earth is 4.54 billion years old, that life has been on the earth, present on the earth for 3.7 billion of those. And I'm going to add my own little tidbit that over the last 100 years, man has been able to evolve to the point where our life expectancy has doubled to 76 years for a white male, somewhere around there. And yet I'm supposed to read this list of impending doomsday items for the earth and believe that my 76-year-old lifespan is the one who is the cause for this and has the cure. It's hilarious. The earth, that's right there. The earth is almost 5 billion years old, which is 4.53333333, billion years older than I am on this earth, and that somehow I'm responsible for killing it. That's David slaying Goliath was a stretch. This is David slaying the universe.
And when they meet, it's a happy land, powerful man, universe.
So it also goes on to say in the first paragraph, thank goodness, that the geological record shows that there have been 5 major extinction level events just since 542 million years ago. So again, my first question is, wait a minute, SUVs, chlorofluorocarbons, Al Gore's sequel didn't come out in time? No, we weren't around for any of those. The first 5 times that the machines destroyed Zion and recreated the Matrix, we weren't even around. But for the 6th one, not only are we here, we're causing it, and we can fix it. Sign me up. How much do I have to spend? So if you want to be obsessed with saving the planet, living on Mars, doing what Elon Musk is doing, by all means, do it. I don't buy into it. I think it's hilarious on its face, and I think the deeper you dive into the science, the more you realize it's nonsense. Having said that, there's an entire page here on this website of all the problems that we're facing, all the ways that we've put the planet in a state of peril. So the question is, what do we do? And I finally got to a summary point here where it said that, quote, nothing less than a reordering of our priorities based on a moral revolution can succeed. Now we're getting somewhere. So first issue with the Pope. This is happening at the Vatican. It's a conference, and this particular panel has 4 people on. I'll tell you who they are. Greg Burke, director of the Holy See Press Office, who is the moderator. Peter Raven, botanist and environmentalist, who is the president of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences. Werner Arber, University of Cambridge Professor Emeritus of Economics. Partha Dasgupta, and PA's Chancellor Bishop Marcelo Sanchez Sorondo. Now, I have to admit, the first time I saw this article, it was because I had read reports that the Pope actually was advising people to have fewer kids, which really did not sit well with me. It looks like they've revised the comments that were made by his spokesperson at this event to say that we shouldn't have kids that we can't properly raise. Well, that's great. That's like saying don't jump off a cliff if you can't fly, don't drive a car if you're pissed drunk, and don't jump in the water if you can't swim. Like, all super useful information. Thank you for that. So if we need more details, what are these spokespeople at the Vatican saying is the Vatican stance on this? I'm going to start with solutions. According to Raven, the central element of the solution for overpopulation is that we need a more limited number of people in the world. Okay. In addition, the problem is one of inequality, where the rich use more of the world's resources than the poor. Probably. In terms of consumption, yeah, because they can afford it. But this leaves out something very important. They also create more resources than the poor. They don't talk about how 50% of the world's population has been pulled out of poverty just in the last 3 decades because of what? Because of poor people? No. Christ said poor people will be with us always. Not time for that discussion here. Let's continue. In the framework of social justice worldwide, we need to find ways for natural resources to be distributed on the basis of compassion and love. So what they're saying is, when you, Mr. Coal Miner, go down in the mine shaft 2 miles down and then walk laterally on your hands and knees, scraping your back against the ceiling 1 mile to whatever they call the coal wall that you have to hit with your hammer for 8 hours straight, you should be doing that not for greedy, selfish reasons, but for compassion and love. And the people who convey that coal up, refine it, and distribute it all over the world have to do it out of love. Let's see how far that gets us. It sounds good, doesn't it? And unrealistic. We hope for support and our ongoing support, that's what it says, for our endeavor to develop sustainability. This is nonsense. This is intellectual gobbledygook. It means nothing. All 4 on the panel concurred that the survival of the planet is tightly linked to the number of people on the planet. Why are we so focused on survival of the planet that's been here for 5 billion years and not the people on it who get a one tiny sliver of a chance to live their lives in prosperity and happiness? Why is the focus on the planet? It's ridiculous. The Biological Extinction Workshop drew particular controversy because it featured a paper by notorious pro-abortion population control advocate, Dr. Paul Ehrlich. At the event, Ehrlich and co-author Dasgupta said the Catholic teaching of responsible parenthood in determining family size has resulted in collective failure in reducing the world's population. So what is that code for? Because we have not been responsible as parents in reducing the world's population, we've collectively failed. It's interesting because this is at the Vatican, and the first mandate in the Bible is what? Multiply and replenish the earth, which has never been rescinded, ever. It's still the first commandment we were given. Seems odd, doesn't it? Now, the author suggested that one way to stop the exhaustion of humanity's natural capital is by imposing a system of, here we go, taxes and regulations that would help modify social norms of behavior. Again, because you failed as parents to do what you need to do to save the planet, we're going to tax you, regulate you, aka financially shame you, and deprive you into changing your social norms of behavior, taking the choice and agency that you have and that you've worked for away from you so that we can make sure that our agenda is protected and not your free will. This is evil. Evil. And why is it evil? Well, because when we talk about lessening parenthood, how is that accomplished? Well, in Ehrlich's case, he has defended forced abortion and mass forced sterilization is a legitimate means to control the world's population. He advocated in an interview with The Guardian for cutting the world's population by 6 billion people down to 1 billion. Think of how many new bed sheets Hitler would need if he thought he could actually accomplish this. Down to 1 billion. But the best part is, what did he say this would be if we were actually to pull this off? If we got the world's population down to 1 billion, this would have a huge pro-life effect. So now getting rid of 6 billion people is now pro-life. And he's not advocating killing them, but he has advocated forced abortion and forced sterilizations, which abortion's kind of like killing them, actually.
I don't think it's killing a baby. I don't. I mean, it's a little bit killing a baby. It's 100% killing a baby. It's totally killing a whole baby.
So this would have an overall pro-life effect because the paper indicated he believed this could sustain many more human lives in the long term, compared with our current uncontrolled growth and prospect of sudden collapse. Now, this is the thing to keep in mind when it comes to the leftist agenda, that everything is about avoiding sudden collapse. We are always one turn away, one wrong turn away from the financial sector completely collapsing, from the food source completely collapsing, from life as we know it completely collapsing. Life collapsing is more of a long-term prospect, and it's the liberal agenda that's been proven time and time again to make that happen. So why is the church endorsing and allowing these people to have a voice at the Vatican? It's irresponsible, and worse, it's evil. It's bad. To their credit, the source that reported on this actually asked for some specificity in their responses. When they asked if there were alternative viewpoints at the conference, they responded, quote, Bishop Serrano, quote, "You can see the papers since everything was published on the website, the texts, and the discussions." Okay. While there were different opinions on population during the conference's discussions, the participants reached two conclusions. Dasgupta, Arlick's co-author and buddy, said during the panel the number of humans on the planet is not sustainable. He added that humans must arrive at a point where their numbers are determined by how the Earth can replenish itself. He suggested that the best step forward to begin curbing population growth would be a focus on the family and education. He didn't clarify what such education might entail. Be afraid, be very afraid. And by the way, if you look at the population growth for Western culture, it's actually on the decline for the first time in modern history. On the decline, while we're sitting here talking about how we depopulate the Earth. If you don't remember Population Bomb that came out a few decades ago, it predicted that life as we know it would end because of mass starvation, overpopulation, and running out of natural resources. Every single prediction, totally untrue. What did it do? Help people become afraid of having large families and encourage women to take measures to do their part, which is what started the abortion epidemic. It's evil. Before we move on to the second question that I have, I just want to refresh your minds to some of the things that the scriptures say about children. One, the scriptures say that children are like arrows, and blessed is he whose quiver is full of them. Christ said to suffer the little ones, for such is the kingdom of God. He said that unless you become as a little child, you cannot be saved. Christ reserved his harshest words for those who would hurt children. And now the Pope and the Vatican are advocating for less of them. I could go on, but the obvious question is why did the creator of the world, who left this resource for us to help us understand what the plan is, not ever bother to mention how perilous our existence is for Mother Earth? Why is he relying on intellectual secularists who stand to profit from this behavior to get the message out for him? And why does the solution always range somewhere from forced taxation to imprisonment for those who don't comply? This is not the Lord's way. This is someone else's way. Whose way? Well, in an interview that the Pope did recently with Eugenio Scalfari, Scalfari actually asked, "You told me some time ago that the precept, love your neighbor as thyself, had to change, given the dark times that we're going through, and become more than thyself. So you yearn for a society where equality dominates. This, as you know, is the program of Marxist socialism and then of communism. Are you therefore thinking of a Marxist type of society?" The Pope: "It has been said many times, and my response has always been that if anything, it is the communists who think like the Christians." What? Christ spoke of a society, the Pope continues, Christ spoke of a society where the poor, the weak, the marginalized have the right to decide. Not demagogues, not Barabbas. First of all, can demagogues not be poor, weak, and marginalized? Is Barabbas not poor and weak and marginalized? He makes no sense. But the people, the poor, whether they have faith in a transcendent God or not, it is they who must help to achieve equality and freedom. The poor have to do it. If you're rich, you can't help solve these problems. You don't have the right tools. This is nonsense. Here's some other interesting things he said as part of this interview. Christians should not give in to the temptation to build walls, even in the face of hateful, cowardly attacks. A reference to global terrorism. Dear brothers and sisters, all walls fall. Yes, we can. Scalfari asked him directly about President Trump during the election. He said, "I do not pass judgment on people and politicians." Ignoring for the moment that if you have the holy priesthood and you're called upon to be a judge in Israel, that's part of your job. But That's not a very PC thing to say. So I simply want to understand the suffering that their approach causes the poor and excluded, which would be making a judgment. It drives me freaking crazy. And it's worth noting that members of the Pontifical Academy for Life will, quote, no longer be required to sign a declaration that they uphold the Church's pro-life teachings. The Academy is also expanding its focus to protection of the environment, another Marxist tenet. Quote, the Academy has a task of a prevalently scientific nature, directed towards the promotion and defense of human life. In particular, it studies the various aspects that relate to the care of the dignity of the human person at the different ages of existence, mutual respect between genders and generations, the defense of the dignity of each single human being, the promotion of a quality of human life that integrates material and spiritual value, with a view to authentic human ecology which may help to recover the original balance of creation between the human persona and the entire universe. So bottom line, communism stands in direct opposition to Christian principles. It's the gospel of envy, the creed of misery and greed. Communism stands in direct opposition to Christian principles. This man is teaching things that are not only not in the Bible, they are 100% in contradiction with the teachings of God. Communism is the gospel of envy and the creed of misery and greed. I interviewed a gentleman who did a book on Nazism. I've read much about the Bolshevik Revolution. These people hated Christians. They wanted them eliminated because Christians stood between them and their ultimate goals. And spirituality was the hardest thing for them to drive out with their propaganda. Now, those citizens, not murdered by these brutal regimes, are then suffocated by the authority of the state and stripped of their freedom, dignity, and purpose. For what reason, Mr. Pope, and for whose benefit? Christianity is about agency and the dignity of the individual. As Milton Friedman said, to have the freedom to choose liberty or death, prosperity or slavery. Communism makes that choice for you, which brings me to the next point. This is hypocritical and unfounded for a Catholic pope to teach this. But ironically, he said something else crazy. He said it's actually better to be an atheist than a hypocritical Catholic. Now, of course, he doesn't see any of the contradictions of Scripture as hypocritical. He doesn't really see the mote in his own eye, only the beam in all of our eyes. This is a very Marxist tenet. Quote, there are those who say, I'm very Catholic. I always go to Mass. I belong to this and that association. He said that some of these people should also say, my life is not Christian. I don't pay my employees proper salaries. I exploit people. I do dirty business. I launder money. I lead a double life. Who is he talking about? Can you give me specific examples? Again, I have no problem with him calling out sin as he sees it, but where does the Vicar of Christ say that the actual Christ said any of these things? Not paying your employees proper salaries, exploiting people, dirty business, laundering money. These aren't just sins, these are crimes, leading a double life. So who exactly is he indicting? Who's he talking about? Well, he says there are many Catholics who are like this and they cause scandal. How many times have we all heard people say, if that person is Catholic, it's better to be an atheist? Recently, I've actually heard it a few times. And I think the people saying it are right. And they're talking about you. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is Pope Francis saying that Muslim terrorism does not exist. If you've heard my last two interviews, I interviewed a gentleman talking about the history of Israel. His name was David Brog. And I also interviewed Nonie Darwish. Two interviews you should definitely listen to. Their books are fantastic. What I don't get about this is the goal of the Muslim caliphate is to destroy the church. Destroy it. Gone. We live in an era where jihadist attacks are happening almost on a daily basis in the Western world, not to mention all the underreported ones that are happening in the Muslim world, where hundreds of people a month are being killed. There was just one this morning in Egypt that killed over 40 people. If you target innocent women and children in order to advance your political goals, you are a terrorist. If you pretend that this is not terrorism, you're an enabler. If you deny it's occurring at all, you're either an ignorant fool or a wise man with very evil designs. This one irritates me so much. These people trust their governments. They trust their leaders. They trust their spiritual advisors to look out for their best interests. And they're being killed. They're being slaughtered. They're being murdered by people who don't just want them dead, who've wanted them dead for thousands of years. And they pretend it's not happening and they do nothing to protect them. A couple more honorable mentions. Quote, sometimes I doze off. This is when Francis said he prays at an altar every night before he goes to bed. The fatigue of the day makes you fall asleep, but God understands. If you're actually speaking with God, you wouldn't fall asleep. So that's pretty telling. Now, quote, this culture of waste has made us insensitive, even to the waste and disposal of food, which is even more despicable when all over the world, many individuals and families are suffering from hunger and nutrition. We should all remember, however, that throwing food away is like stealing from the tables of the poor and the hungry. Now, I thought that's interesting because one of my all-time favorite scriptures is in Amos when he talks about the famine. Famine, right? People starving. It says in chapter 8, verse 11, "Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but of hearing the words of the Lord. And they shall wander from sea to sea, and from the north even to the east. They shall run to and fro to seek the word of the Lord, and shall not find it." I believe this was a prophecy about the time on earth when the Lord's church would not exist, and that it would be restored on the earth as part of the restitution of all things, also quoted in the scriptures. The ironic thing is that the Catholic Church is the only one that's existed throughout this period where the famine would have existed. So my hope, my prayer, my exhortation to Catholics and to everyone who can hear my voice, seek the Lord in prayer. Learn the doctrine that's in the scriptures, soften your heart, and ask, to whom shall we go? Because when the blind follow the blind, they both fall into a ditch.